Hello everyone, welcome all to the Holocaust Remembrance Day program of Human Rights Solidarity. My name is Sudan and I'm 15 years old. As you might know, the Holocaust is the horrific event that led to over 6 million Jews' death. To avoid bad experiences like Holocaust, we should remember these days and draw lessons. That's why we, as the Immigration Committee of HRS, prepared a short event. We're gonna have valuable guests and there will be inspiring and memorable art and music performances. I wish you have a good time already now. Enjoy!
Hello everyone, my name is Zainab and I will be one of your hosts today. I am 17 years old and I live in Germany. I hope you all enjoy our program today. Now we are going to watch an interview with Susanna Kester and Sacha Kester. Enjoy!
Hello everyone and welcome to one of our programs for Holocaust Remembrance Day. I am Ihsan, a 17-year-old member of the Immigration Committee. I am joined here today by Mr. Sacha Kester and his daughter Susanna. Mr. Sacha, could you explain yourself, who you are and obviously your story?
Okay, well, I'm known as a Holocaust survivor. I was born in Paris on the 1st of September 1936. And on my we were living in a small flat in Paris. My family, my mother, my father, and my older brother. My parents were actually Polish, but they had escaped from Poland and migrated to France because of the situation for Jews in Poland was pretty dangerous. So they moved to France where they thought it's a civilized country, they won't have the same problems. Anyway, we lived in this flat in Paris. On my third birthday, Germany invaded Poland and started the Second World War. And it wasn't too long after that they invaded other countries. And yes, they occupied Paris in June 1940. And on the 20th of August 1941, the SS used the French police to round up Jewish immigrants. And so my father was obviously implicated in this. And some French policemen came to our flat and wanted to arrest my father. He was ill and said he couldn't go. He was in bed. So the police left. They came back a little bit later the same day with some SS officers. They told my mother, who was carrying me in her arms, to face the wall in the living room, and my brother was standing next to them, also facing the wall. And they went into the bedroom. They assaulted my father till he screamed in pain and he passed out, and they carried him out in a blanket. And that's how he was arrested. And he was taken to a prison in Drancy. And he was in that prison for about, I think it was 10 months or so, before he was taken to Auschwitz to his death. We did visit Drancy as a family. We couldn't actually meet my father, but I've got a memory of standing in the street and looking up at a balcony, and he was standing on the balcony and waved to us, and we waved back. I'm not sure if it's a true memory or if it's just a dream I had, but I understand from my brother that we did visit the prison, not inside, of course, just outside. We went to deliver a food parcel, which was taken by the police so they could inspect what was inside the parcel. Anyway, I need to look at this. Yes, in July 1942, they rounded up about 1,300 Jews and held them in a velodrome, in a sort of an arena, without food or facilities. Quite a cruel roundup. And after a couple of days, everybody was put on train trucks, which were taken to Auschwitz. Now, we escaped that because I think that my mother got wind of this beforehand. So we were hidden in a room near, not too far from where our flat was, but the shutters were closed, and we weren't allowed to make any noise because we didn't want to be found out. And soon after that, my mother arranged for my brother and I, and also a girl about my age, the three of us were evacuated to a small village in France near Châteaudun. And we were lodged with an elderly couple who lived in a cottage by a wood. And of course, you know, we were separated from our mother, so things were pretty awful. The elderly couple were not unkind to us, but also they didn't in any way show us the sort of affection that parents do. So it was, you know, quite hard. And the conditions were, I mean, it's quite incredible that this was the 20th century, because in this cottage there was no water, no electricity. Water, you had to go to there was a pump over 100 yards away that we had to pump the water and carry it in buckets. And I was too young to do that. My brother had to do that. Lighting was by candles and oil lamps. And there was just one room in this cottage and a little lean-to. And we all lived in that small space. My brother and I had to sleep in the lean-to, which wasn't heated, so it was very cold in the winter. And there was no toilet in the cottage. You had to just go into the woods. It's hard to believe that it wasn't the Middle Ages. We had German soldiers came at one point, but nobody denounced us. I think in the village it was known that we were Jewish children, but nobody denounced us to the Germans. Although I'm not sure they would have done anything, because these were not SS people. They were just regular army people, and they may not have been bothered about Jewish children, but the SS certainly were. I've sort of lost my train of thought now.
How long were you in the cottage, Dad? How long were you staying there?
Well, it was about 3 years we were in the cottage. At one point, my brother went to school in a small town nearby, and he only came to visit us every 2 or 3 weeks at the weekend. I think things were pretty awful for him there as well, because he was being used with other children as a human shield. So they were living in an ammunition dump, in a sense to protect the dump. So it was, quite dangerous. And of course, if they had known that he was Jewish, it would have been possibly the end for him. Anyway, yes. So
I'm just going to ask how you found out about what happened to your mum.
Yes, I think we were hidden in this particular place because of the concierge of the block of flats where we were living. I think she arranged it. And one day her daughter came to the village and told us that our mother had been arrested. And that would have been in 1943. In fact, she and my aunt were arrested together, and they were taken to Auschwitz also to their death. And then after the war, we went back to Paris and stayed for a short time with the concierge, but she had a very small flat, which was it was not ideal. So she handed us over to an organization called OSE, Œuvre de Secours aux Enfants. And they put us into orphanages. So we went from one orphanage to another until 1948, when my brother went on a holiday to London with a school party, and he made contact with some family that we had there that we heard about, and they insisted that my brother had to go back to France for his studies, but they insisted that he come back again the following Christmas, 1948, and the two of us went to London for a 2-week holiday, but I never went back to France after that. Eventually, I was taken in by the family, and eventually I was adopted. At age 14, I was adopted by the family. And so I've been in UK ever since. That's my story.
Obviously, you were quite young when this took place, like you said, at the age of 3. I think this is when the Second World War started. So a question we actually had was, what got you through all these years? Maybe that's not applicable for World War II, between that 39 to 45. But what got you through after you came to the UK, maybe after you were adopted, maybe during the times when you were with your brother at the cottage? What got you through all these years? Obviously, it's difficult without a mother and a father, especially after your brother went as well. How was it for you? What got you through?
Well, it's difficult to say, really. I mean, when you're that young, life is what it is. You don't have any comparison. I mean, obviously, I was not very happy, but it wasn't, you just had to live day by day. I mean, I was fed, I had food, and I didn't get much love, but you don't know what you're missing when you're that young. You just know that it's, life is not good, that's all.
So obviously, when people think of the Holocaust, only negative connotation, it only has only negative connotations, right? People just think about all the deaths and all the problems caused. But can you remember any positive moments you had during these troublesome years?
I'm sorry, but you keep cutting out, so I don't get a complete sentence.
Was I cutting out?
Okay, maybe ask the question again.
Okay.
Yeah, you were a bit. But...
Okay. All right. So I was just saying, obviously the Holocaust has negative connotations. When people think of the Holocaust, it just reminds them of death, of murder, of all these problems. But can you remember any positive moments you had during these troublesome years?
Positive memories, I can't really think of any positive memories, but of course there were positive things. But I mean, there were a lot of very courageous people who risked their lives to save the lives of others. Humanity still continued to flourish under very difficult conditions. I mean, people were afraid, but many people, in spite of being afraid, did do good things to help, but not enough of them to make a big difference until after the war.
Well, it's quite incredible that, two-thirds of Jewish sort of European Jewry were murdered. But for those people who hid children or hid people or took risks, as Dad said, have meant that our race and our culture has been able to kind of continue. So yeah, we've got a lot to be grateful for, really.
When people read about these events, when people hear stories from survivors, when they watch movies about these, for example, I watched Schindler's List last night with my family, and these events really are, unbelievable when you think about it. How can, people do such things? But then, it also reminds me, are there any problems that happen in the current world we live in that remind you of the Holocaust? Is there anything that, takes place similar to that of the genocide?
I'm afraid so. I'm afraid that the current world politics resemble a lot to what happened in Germany at that time. And it's awful to see how people manipulated to do such horrific things. And, I think we're seeing the thin end of the wedge at the moment. And I think it's important that we must resist, and that before it's too late, because it does get too late. It gets so bad that you risk your life to resist. At the moment, it's still possible to resist without risking your life. Well, and this is when we have to do it.
We have to do it, you're right, Dad, and that's in Europe, the rise of fascism in Europe at the moment. But there's been loads of genocides since the Second World War. Rwanda, Bosnia, Darfur, and now with the Uyghur in China is just appalling. And, a lot of, I think it particularly is painful for Jewish organizations who actually are quite active in bringing awareness to these things. Holocaust Memorial Day is not just about the Holocaust in from the Nazis. It's about Holocaust since. It's important to raise awareness. Dad, I think you'll agree with that.
Absolutely.
correct me if I'm mistaken, but obviously, in the Second World War, the way it ended was with Germany's surrender. So I don't know if if other countries were able to do anything to prevent it. But a question that we also want to ask is, with the current day problems that relate to that of the Holocaust, how can we prevent these? How can we help stop these and end these?
I think we have to call out lies and misinformation, and we mustn't allow these dark forces to take over. And unfortunately, they are at the moment. I mean, Trumpism is just one of those things. Luckily, he's not there anymore, but Trumpism still lives. There's still nearly half of America still believes in Trump, even if he's no longer the president. Over here, we have a government which is also the thin end of the wedge. They're using Nazi methods to get what they want rather than what people need. And well, all over Europe, there's, I mean, what's happening in Hungary, and it's really bad that the forces of evil are stronger than the forces of good.
I think part of the reason why I'm involved with this organisation called Generation to Generation, which send people like me, second generation survivors, into schools to tell the family story. Mostly it's about education. It's about encouraging young people and the next generations to seek out the facts. For example, in Rwanda, people were drip fed this information about I think the Tutsis, that they were cockroaches, and they were drip fed this over years and years and years. They were dehumanized. So when the call came to go out and kill the cockroaches, people did. The same in Nazi Germany. Jewish people were portrayed as subhuman, as evil, as very suspicious. And so people sort of believed it. Goodness knows what information is being given about the Uyghur Muslims at the moment. But the point is that to encourage people to not just accept the first thing they hear, to research it, to look at it, to ask questions, to inquire, to kind of have a broader perspective rather than just believe the headline, which I think is, everyone is doing that at the moment, but I think it's brought on by fear. You look at the headline, oh my God, it's happening. And then you read another headline and another one, rather than actually, looking underneath. Does that make sense, Dad?
Yep.
Yeah.
You spoke about your organization as well, Generation to Generation. And you said how obviously they educate the younger people, which leads me on to my next question, actually. What lessons can we teach this new younger generation? Some say that activism's best form is education, to teach the younger people. So what lessons can we teach, and how can we teach them?
Well,
Go on, Susie.
I've got two girls myself, and the reason that I'm doing this work with Generation to Generation came from my need to educate them, but really as a household, and with Dad is a magnificent role model for our family, because he is the one that goes out on marches. He is the one that writes to his MP to complain about something. He is the one to seek out articles to kind of learn more. So we take our girls on marches, and we talk about things at home. We talk about different peoples. We ask questions. We've got a neighbourhood with, it's really I mean, we're in London, I guess we're lucky, but it's really multicultural, multi-faith, multi-international. And we get to know people. And it's about having the guts to get to know something other than yourself. So even if you are proud of your community and your culture, great, but find out about other cultures, other communities, you know, rather than sort of shutting your eyes to everything else. I think that's what I would say.
And just going back to you, Sasha, obviously since World War II, we have, you know, Germany has created peace with countries all across the world. Has your thoughts changed on Germany and German people? What are your thoughts on them at the moment?
Well, I don't think it was a German problem. I think it's a problem of humanity. I mean, you know, an example is what's happened in the United States. It can happen anywhere. There's good people, there's bad people. It doesn't need many bad people to create the conditions for something like the Holocaust. I mean, the thing about the Holocaust that is sort of unique was the organization that it was. You know, it was an industry killing people, but I think that I have nothing against the Germans as Germans. I'm against Nazism, and it can take hold anywhere, even in the UK, unfortunately. There was a time when I thought it couldn't, because people here were sufficiently educated and savvy about the world to not let it happen here. I don't believe that anymore. I mean, you know, we voted for Brexit, we voted for the awful government we have now, and so it could happen here. I mean, as it is, you know, our present government is trying to shut down scrutiny, and it's just, you know, the Nazi methods.
I think also in Germany they actively talk about this within their schools, because they want their next generations to understand what happened. There's kind of quite a lot of work done on reparation and understanding what happened and why. But I think Dad's completely right. It isn't about Germany as such. It's about the ideas and how quickly they can take hold.
It's like we can't hate all Chinese people right now for current crisis with the Uyghur Muslims. You have to, you know, hold your grudge against those who have the problem with Uyghur Muslims. We can't hate all, you know, Chinese people for problems that are happening there right now. I completely agree with you. And just one last question to finish off our program. Obviously, the events you faced, that you know, felt, those can't be forgotten, obviously. But do you get any special emotions, any special feelings that take place on Holocaust Memorial Day?
I have to say that this year is the first year when I've really taken note of Holocaust Day, Holocaust Memorial Day. It's not something, I suppose most of my life I've tried to put these thoughts about the Holocaust behind me and just get on with life. It's only more recently, probably because of the way that politics is developing in the whole world, that I feel the need to sort of go back to those things and to think about the Holocaust. And, you know, I'm pleased now to be able to talk about the Holocaust, if it will help to stop this rise of Nazism.
And I think that for me, because I think Dad will agree that it was never spoken about at home. I knew that my grandparents were killed at Auschwitz, but it was never really spoken about. So for me, it always did have a resonance this day, because it kind of gave permission for me to to have feelings about it, if you like. Not that Dad didn't let me have feelings about it, but just that it just was not on the table. We didn't think about it together. And Dad is writing, doing some writing and writing about his life, and has found out more information about his younger life. And so kind of lots of different things have merged that we're able to kind of talk about it more. I mean, even to the point of like, we weren't sure of my grandfather's name until last year, I think. But anyway, so going back to your question, it does have a resonance because it's a ritual. It allows the whole Jewish community and beyond, other communities, to mourn, because there's a lot to be mournful about. And there still is, sadly, there still is.
Yeah, Sacha, I think what you're doing, sharing your story, trying to help new people, trying to help the younger generations with your stories, I think that's really amazing. And Susanna, with your generations to generation, I think what they do over there is also quite amazing. And we will make sure to share the socials in the link below as well to check out Generation to Generation. Thank you so much, Sacha and Susanna, for being here with us and for speaking.
Thank you, Susanna Kester and Sacha Kester. That was really inspiring. We are now going to watch an art performance from our volunteers. Enjoy. Thanks to our volunteers to their fabulous work. Next, we have another interview with Dr. Joanna Mischlich. Enjoy.
Hello everyone, I'm Asiya and I'm here today with Joanna Mischlich. Hi Joanna.
Hi Asiya.
How are
Thank
you
you for
doing?
having me.
Oh, it's our pleasure to have you here. Thanks for being here. So Dr. Joanna Mischlich is a social and cultural historian and founder and first director of HBI, Hadassah Brandeis Institute project on families, children, and the Holocaust at Brandeis University. She is also a honorary senior research associate at the UCL Center for the Study of Collective Violence, the Holocaust, and Genocide. Her research focuses on social and cultural history of Poland and East European Jews, the Holocaust, its memory in Europe, East European Jewish childhood, rescue and rescues of Jews in East Central Europe, and anti-Semitism, racism, and nationalism in Europe. She is a recipient of many prestigious academic awards and fellowships, most recently the Gerda Henkel Fellowship.
Thank you, Asiya, for your kind introduction. And before I speak, I would like to say that I'm actually in the process of writing 2 books. So one of them is a collective biography of child Holocaust survivors from Eastern Europe, especially from Poland, where I come from. And my other project that I would like to develop in the future is a project looking at the history and memories, especially memories and identities of child survivors of different genocides in the 20th century in comparative perspective, starting with Jewish child survivors and also looking at survivors, young survivors of Cambodian genocide and Rwandan genocide.
Can I ask a question? I didn't know you were from Poland.
Asiya.
So So your research is focused on the Holocaust and other genocides, of course. What did coming from Poland play a role in this? What did it make you interested in it? Seeing the effects yourself, maybe.
Of course, for many historians, there is a personal element in our personal familiar element. It's what we are doing, what areas are of interest to us. So that's also my case.
Thank you. Sorry if it was too personal.
So today, on the eve of the International Holocaust Day, on 27 January 2021, we are painfully aware that COVID-19 has hastened the departure of many Holocaust survivors. And just to remind you that child Holocaust survivors are the last living Holocaust survivors with us today. It hastened the departure of many of these child Holocaust survivors, as well as resistors and eyewitnesses of the Second World War. This is especially troubling news given the current rise of anti-Semitism, neo-fascism, political extremism of all kinds on the left and on the right, and manipulation, sinister manipulation of the history and memory of the Holocaust across the world. During the events at the Capitol in Washington, D.C., on 6 January this year, some of the rioters wore anti-Jewish hate shirts making mockery of the destruction of 6 million European Jews. As never before, Holocaust education seems an urgent and timely project. But what kind of Holocaust education do we need? In my view, we need Holocaust education that is not purely about facts and figures, but rather about individuals and families' life experiences before, during, and after the Holocaust. These aspects could capture the minds and hearts of young people like yourselves all over the world who could relate to them both as individuals and as members of particular families and particular communities. It is widely recognized that education is the key to preventing anti-Semitism, racism, xenophobia, and Holocaust denial. Hatred and suspicion of the other can only be overcome if we gain a true understanding of the horrors of the Holocaust and other post-1945 genocides, and the long shadow they have casted on survivors and their multi-generational families, their children and grandchildren. Learning about facts and figures only from history books, unfortunately, seems to have a little impact compared to learning from testimonies of individuals who had experienced or who had witnessed firsthand the everyday horrors of the Holocaust and other post-1945 genocides. Between 2012 and 2020, the refugee crisis in Europe and beyond has triggered evocation of young Jewish survivors from the Holocaust in the commentaries about the plight of young victims and survivor refugees of wars and genocides in the first 2 decades of the 21st century. In my own essay, Mapping the History of Child Holocaust Survivors, I also argued that the history of Jewish child survivors can offer a valuable template for historical and contemporary comparisons that in turn could advance our understanding of the impact of displacement and the loss of family upon today's young survivor refugees. Jewish child survivors' voices can offer a warning against making long-lasting mistakes in dealing with today's child survivor refugees. Voices of Jewish child survivors, as well as voices of child survivors of Cambodian and Rwandan genocides, can make a difference and be the most valuable lesson in education about the destructive power of war and genocide on individuals, families, and communities, about ruptures, irreparable ruptures in their lives, the lives of individuals and communities. However, I do not think that such a vital, holistic educational project is easily viable in spite of the frequent evocations of the plight of young Jewish refugees in the current discussions about the situation of young refugees from the Middle East and North Africa today. It seems to me that in these discussions, evocation of young Jewish refugees usually have a rather purely emotive character and are vague, if not shallow and hollow in terms of substance. Although references to Jewish child survivors are raised with an important humanitarian goal in mind, the public discussions tend to ignore meaningful, specific, common experiences of young survivors that could really shake our conscience and have a real impact on current policies, practices, and our current understanding of war and genocide. Specific comparisons between the plight of Jewish child survivors and today's young survivors beg to be made. Of course, I do not like to compare apples and oranges here, but they beg to be made in many cases. But they are absent from the news and public representations. For example, in the BBC brief poignant video report of 17 December 2019 about refugee camps on a Greek island Lesbos, we could see young Syrian refugees from a war zone who, in the words of a child psychologist working in the camp, do not want to live any longer. A wish to die expressed by young children in the refugee camps reveals the desperate physical and mental situation these children are in. It gives us an insight to these children's state of mind and their mental health. Sharing this troubling news should shake the audience conscience. Child orphan survivors of past genocides had experienced the same dilemma and struggled with similar painful mental health issues. For example, Jewish child survivors in the Jewish children's homes in early post-war Poland, and here at this image you see a Jewish children's home in Otwock in central Poland that was set up in late January or mid-January 1945. And on the picture next to the collective group of child survivors in the Otwock Jewish orphanage, we see one of them, Walter Salzburg, with his Polish rescuer, incredible man, already in London, sometimes in 1947. So for many children, as we see in this picture, this collective picture of child survivors in Otwock, as well for many of these child survivors who later found themselves in DP camps in post-1945 Germany, the horrors actually continued after 1945. They didn't want to continue on living and contemplated or attempted suicide as a result of the full awareness at the end of the war that they lost their whole families, no one came for them, and their painful experiences also during the war, ranging from physical to mental and even sexual mistreatment by those who were supposed to protect them. The memories of these dramatic experiences have become an intrinsic part of their individual identities and their memories. In my view, paying attention to and depicting these shared painful experiences can be conducive to drawing a deeper and longer lasting public attention to children's suffering, not only during, but also in the aftermath of wartime and genocidal conditions. These specific comparisons should be an intrinsic part of remembering and memorialization of child survivors of past and present genocides. To remember Jewish child survivors in a meaningful way, we have to accept that in the aftermath of the genocide, they have transformed themselves into professional adults, proud of their families' lives, in spite of the multiple wounds, not because they were actually able to rid of the wartime wounds and start anew from 0 point in 1945. Their wartime multiple scars, both physical and psychological, could not quickly and fully heal after the end of 1945, and these wounds have been carried into their adulthood in spite of professional, familiar, and social successes in adulthood. Many legacies, such as specific illnesses, fears of separation, or losing a close family member, are part of their post-war lives and the lives of their children, as well as grandchildren. Even when we look at the Holocaust child survivors as a cohort with a remarkable, successful, happy post-war life accounts, we also cannot forget some of the child survivors who didn't follow that path. We cannot forget the majority of Jewish children who had perished, and those who physically survived, but who collapsed psychologically under the weight of the wartime experiences and struggled with mental illness for decades, and in some cases committed suicide. Only by accepting these complexities and painful truths pertaining to the Jewish child survivors' biographies, we could learn valuable lessons that we could apply in our discussions, treatment and policies towards today's vulnerable child survivors of war and genocides. We have to keep in mind that for today's young refugees from war zones, finding the safe haven is increasingly challenging, if not impossible task. But reaching the new peaceful Western country, such as United Kingdom or France, to start life anew does not mean that these young survivors would transform themselves instantly into happy individuals and would begin life from the year zero and abandon their past. They would not necessarily shed the multiple wounds and scars they had incurred in their wartime torn childhood. These wounds and scars would stay with them and would shape their identities and memories, though they might lead successful professional and familiar life, as Jewish child survivors have done. Their narratives about the loss of families and communities and about their mental troubles caused by uprootedness and displacement should be the fundamental part of the ways we engage with them, relate to them, and portray them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was beautiful, Joanna. Thank you everyone for tuning in. I hope these words have helped you, have reminded you of the horrors, have helped you take some lessons. And we are all in hope that none of these horrors get repeated again. Thank you very much again, Joanna.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Especially thanks to Dr. Joanna Mislish. It was very motivating. Now we have a music performance of the song Schindler's List by John Williams, made by our volunteers. We hope you enjoy it. Thanks to our volunteers for their wonderful work. Now we are going to listen to a poem by one of our lovely volunteers.
Today I would like to share some of my favorite passages found in Anne Frank's diary. This one she has written on 7th of March 1944, and it starts off like this. My advice is go outside to the country, enjoy the sun and all nature has to offer. Go outside and try to recapture the happiness within yourself. Think of all the beauty in yourself and in everything around you and be happy. Because what are you supposed to do if you become part of the suffering? You'd be completely lost. On the contrary, beauty remains even in misfortune. If you just look for it, you discover more and more happiness and regain your balance. A person who's happy will make others happy. A person who has courage and faith will never die in misery. On 6th of July 1944, Anne Frank wrote such a powerful passage that stayed with me ever since. It changed my vision, it changed my life. She says, "We're all alive, but we don't know why or what for. We're all searching for happiness. We're all leading lives that are different and yet the same. We have the opportunity to get an education and make something of ourselves. We have many reasons to hope for great happiness, but we have to earn it. And that's something you can't achieve by taking the easy way out. Earning happiness means doing good and working, not speculating and being lazy. Laziness may look inviting, but only work gives you true satisfaction."
Thanks for joining us. It was lovely to have you here with us. We hope this program has reminded all of us a bit about Holocaust and helped us to take more lessons from it. And a special thanks from Humor and Solidarity to our guests, our audiences, participants, speakers, and volunteers for their contributions. See you in our next program.